Yes, I accept this, boss.
She agreed to bathe the wheelchair-bound mob boss in exchange for money. Tessa Fitzgerald needed the $50,000 to continue graduate school. Special care, 3 months and no questions, her friend said. Massimo Pasquale was vulnerable for the first time in his life. Temporary paralysis and the humiliation was constant. During the first bath, he watched her every move. "You're not afraid of me. Should I be?" Scars all over his body told violent stories. When she helped him stand, nearly falling. Hi everyone, I'm Lena, the author of this channel, and today I wanted to thank our members. Thank you so much for your support, guys. So if you want to be featured in the next video, answer me below. What do you like most about my stories? I'll be reading all the comments. Chapter 1. The Dangerous Job. The red notification on my phone screen seemed to scream louder with every second I looked at it. The bank wasn't suggesting, it was demanding. 3 overdue graduate school payments and the final deadline expiring in 2 weeks. After that, my dream of specializing in physical therapy would become just another bill I couldn't pay. I sat at the tiny table in my apartment and put my head in my hands. My salary from the clinic where I worked barely covered rent and basic bills. Borrowing money from family was out of the question because they had even less than I did. Frustration burned in my throat as I tried to find a solution that simply didn't exist. That's when my phone rang and Camilla's name appeared on the screen. My friend had a gift for calling at the worst moments, but also at the right moments. I answered on the second ring, trying to disguise the desperation in my voice. "Tess, I need to talk to you, in person." Her voice sounded strange, like she was choosing each word carefully. "Can you meet me at the cafe in half an hour?" I agreed without thinking much, and hung up. Camilla wasn't the type who set up urgent meetings for no reason. She knew people, had contacts I didn't even want to know where they came from, and always seemed to know when I needed help. Which scared me a little, to be honest. When I got to the cafe, she was already sitting at the corner table, away from the windows and prying eyes. Her dark hair was pulled back in a high bun, and she was nervously fidgeting with her coffee cup. Her eyes met mine as soon as I walked through the door, and she made a discreet gesture for me to come closer. "You've got that look like you missed the last bus and got mugged on the way." Camilla didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Let me guess. School?" I sighed and let my bag drop onto the chair beside me. 3 payments behind. If I don't pay in the next 2 weeks, I'm out. And then 2 years down the drain. She nodded slowly, as if she already knew this before I even said it. Her fingers drummed on the table as she studied me with that calculating look. That always made me nervous. Camilla was a lawyer, but she also moved in circles I preferred not to know about. She never talked much about the clients she served or the people she knew. And I never asked. "I have a job for you." The words came out fast and direct. "Pays very well, but it's dangerous." My heart did a strange leap in my chest. Dangerous. The word echoed in my head as I tried to process what she was saying. Camilla crossed her arms on the table and leaned forward, lowering her voice until only I could hear. "Taking care of a rich man. Injured. Complicated." She paused, letting each word hang in the air between us. 3 months of work. Private nursing, 24 hours a day. "You'll live at his house during this period." I swallowed hard. Live at a stranger's house. A rich and complicated man. Her words didn't make sense together, but at the same time they made perfect sense. This wasn't a regular nursing job. It was something more, something she wasn't saying completely. "How much?" The question came out of my mouth before I could think better of it. Camilla held my gaze for a long moment. $50,000. The coffee almost fell from my hand. 50,000 for 3 months. That was more than I made in 2 years working at the clinic. It was enough to pay for school, clear my debts, and still have enough left over to live comfortably while I finished grad school. It was the solution to all my financial problems. And precisely because of that, it sounded way too dangerous. What kind of care is worth $50,000 in 3 months? "Camilla," my voice came out tense, suspicious. "What aren't you telling me?" She sighed and ran her hand over her face. "Private nursing. He's recovering from a serious accident. Needs someone qualified, discreet, and who doesn't ask questions. The previous nurses couldn't handle it. He's difficult. Very difficult." "Difficult how?" I insisted, feeling fear and curiosity fighting inside me. "He has a strong temper. He's used to having control over everything and everyone. The accident left him in a situation he hates. Vulnerable. Dependent. And he doesn't deal well with that. Camilla paused and her eyes darkened. But Tess, this man has resources, a lot of resources, and connections you don't want to know about. If you accept, you can't ask questions about his life. Just take care of him and keep your mouth shut. The tension in my chest increased. Resources and connections. She was talking about someone powerful, someone who lived in a completely different world from mine. A world where $50,000 meant nothing, and where discretion was worth more than anything. And if I don't want to accept? I asked, already knowing the answer. Then you lose your spot in grad school and keep struggling to survive on the SAM. Clinic salary. Her answer was direct. No beating around the bush. But if you accept, you solve your financial problems and still gain unique professional experience. The choice is yours, Tess. Just don't take too long to decide. They want an answer by tomorrow. I spent the whole night awake, staring at my bedroom ceiling and weighing my options. $50,000. 3 months of my life, a dangerous and complicated man. Logic said to refuse, to look for another solution. But my heart knew there was no other solution. This was my only chance. The next morning, I called Camilla and said I accepted. Her voice sounded relieved and worried at the same time when she gave me the instructions. In the next 48 hours, my life would be completely investigated. They would search every corner of my existence before letting me into that house. It was the price of discretion. The next 2 days were the most tense of my life. Men in suits showed up at the clinic where I worked, asking discreet questions about me. My boss looked at me strangely, but didn't say anything. My financial history was reviewed, my previous relationships investigated. Even my college grades were analyzed. They wanted to make sure I was trustworthy, that I didn't pose a risk. When I finally received the message confirming that I had been approved, I felt a mix of relief and terror. The address came along with the instructions. I should present myself at the mansion the next day, at 8 in the morning, with a suitcase containing clothes for 3 months. Nothing else. No personal cell phone, no laptop, nothing that could compromise his privacy. The car that came to pick me up was black, with dark windows and an intimidating presence. The driver didn't say a word during the entire trip. He just drove in silence while I watched the city give way to increasingly exclusive neighborhoods, until we finally arrived at an area surrounded by high walls and heavy security. The gate opened automatically, and the car advanced down a private road lined with perfectly aligned trees. When the mansion appeared before me, I had to hold my breath. It wasn't just big, it was imposing. The modern architecture mixed with classic details created an atmosphere of power and elegance that made me feel completely out of my element. 2 armed guards flanked the main entrance. They didn't smile, didn't greet, just watched me with eyes trained to identify threats. I swallowed hard and got out of the car, gripping my suitcase harder than necessary. The driver had already disappeared, and I was alone in front of that enormous door. Before I could ring the doorbell, the door opened. A tall man with gray hair and an impeccable suit looked me up and down. His eyes were cold and calculating, the kind that saw right through people. He didn't need to say anything for me to know I was being judged at that exact moment. Tessa Fitzgerald. It wasn't a question. It was a confirmation. He already knew who I was before I even opened my mouth. I'm Ramiro Romano, Mr. Pasquale's right-hand man. Come in. The interior of the mansion was even more impressive than the exterior. The floors were Italian marble, and the walls displayed works of art I'd only seen in books. Everything there screamed wealth, but also power. The kind of power that didn't need to be flaunted because it was too obvious to be ignored. Ramiro led me through wide corridors to a private room. He closed the door behind us and looked at me seriously. Before you go up to meet him, I need to make a few things clear. Rules that cannot be broken under any circumstances. I nodded, feeling my heart beat faster. He started walking around the room, hands crossed behind his back as he spoke with absolute authority. Rule number 1. Absolute silence about everything you see, hear, or witness in this house. What happens here, stays here, forever. His eyes pierced through me. Rule number 2. Total loyalty to Mr. Pasquale. You work for him and only him. His needs come before anything else. He paused and his expression became even more serious. Rule number 3. Breaking confidentiality or betraying his trust will have serious consequences. And when I say serious, I'm not talking about a lawsuit. I'm talking about the kind of consequence you don't want to know about. Fear ran up my spine, but I forced my voice to come out steady. I understand. I hope you really do. Ramiro crossed his arms. Mr. Pasquale is going through a difficult time. The accident left him in a situation he never imagined being in. He's vulnerable for the first time in his life, and that makes him furious. The 3 previous nurses didn't last even 2 weeks. He dismissed them. All of them. Why? The question escaped before I could contain myself. Because they pitied him. And he hates being treated with pity. Ramiro stepped closer. You're not here to pity him. You're here to do your job. Treat him with respect, but without condescension. He may be in a wheelchair now, but he's still who he's always been. Don't forget that. Before I could respond, the door opened again and an older man, wearing a medical coat, entered the room. His eyes were kind but tired. He extended his hand to me with a polite smile. Tessa, right? I'm Dr. Romano Benedetti, Mr. Pasquale's private physician. He shook my hand firmly. Let's talk about his clinical condition before you go up. We sat down and the doctor opened a thick folder with exams and medical reports. Mr. Pasquale suffered a serious accident 3 months ago. Explosion. The damage was extensive, especially in the lumbar region and lower limbs. He underwent 5 surgeries and the initial prognosis was permanent paralysis. My heart sank. Permanent paralysis. That meant he might never walk again. The gravity of the situation began to weigh on me. However, the doctor continued, he's been recovering beyond expectations. Sensation is gradually returning, but he still can't walk without support. He'll need intensive physical therapy, strict medication, and constant monitoring. In addition, he paused, he has serious anger control issues. Frustration over his current condition makes him explosive. Verbally, of course, but it's intense. I understand. My voice came out weaker than I would have liked. The previous nurses couldn't handle his temper. He intimidated them, treated them coldly, and refused to cooperate. You're going to need patience and firmness at the same time. The doctor looked me in the eyes. Can you do that? I took a deep breath. The question hung in the air between us as I thought about everything I had heard so far. A powerful man used to controlling everything, now trapped in a wheelchair and furious with the world. 3 nurses had already given up. The house was a fortress surrounded by secrets and dangers I didn't even know, yet. And I was about to enter that world without knowing if I could come out, unscathed. But $50,000, my school, my future. Everything depended on those 3 months. I can. The word came out firm from my mouth, firmer than I actually felt inside. Dr. Romano nodded and closed the folder. Great. Then I'll go over the medication routine, the physical therapy schedules, and the specific recommendations. You'll have my number for any medical emergency. And Tessa, he held my gaze intensely, be patient with him. Underneath all that anger, there's a man trying to find himself again. Ramiro appeared at the door again, gesturing for me to follow him. My heart raced. It was time. I grabbed my suitcase and stood up, feeling my legs tremble slightly as I followed the suited man through the silent corridors of the mansion. We climbed an imposing marble staircase with gold railings. Each step seemed to weigh more than the previous one. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of our footsteps echoing off the high walls. Old paintings watched us as we advanced through the 2nd floor, and I wondered how many secrets those walls had already kept. Ramiro stopped in front of a double door at the end of the hallway. The dark wood was crafted with elegant details, and the bronze handles gleamed under the soft light of the chandeliers. He turned to me one last time, and for the first time since we met, I saw something that looked like genuine concern in his eyes. He's going to test you. He'll try to intimidate you, push you away, make you quit like the others. Ramiro spoke low, almost in a whisper. But if you really want to help him, don't show fear. Don't show pity. And especially, don't treat him like he's fragile. He'll hate you for it. I swallowed hard and nodded. My hand gripped the suitcase handle so tightly that my fingers began to hurt. Ramiro knocked twice on the door, a dry sound that reverberated in the silence of the hallway. There was no answer from inside. He waited a few seconds and then turned the handle, opening the door slowly. The revealed room was plunged in shadows, with heavy curtains blocking almost all natural light. The air in there seemed denser, charged with a tension I could feel on my skin. "Sir," Ramiro announced with respect, but without subservience, "your new nurse has arrived." The silence that followed was deafening. My eyes tried to adjust to the dimness of the room, searching for the figure I knew was in there, watching me, judging me, deciding if I was worthy of staying or if I would be discarded like the others. Ramiro stepped away from the door and gave me one last warning look before gesturing for me to enter. "Good luck, Miss Fitzgerald. You're going to need it." And then he was gone, leaving the door ajar behind him. I was alone at the entrance of that dark room, with my suitcase in hand and my heart beating so hard I was sure it could be heard for miles. On the other side of that door was the man who controlled everything around him, even in a wheelchair. The man who had the power to change my life or destroy it completely. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and took the first step into the room. The shadows engulfed me as the door closed softly behind me with a final click. There was no turning back. I was inside Massimo Pasquale's world, and something told me nothing would be as I expected. Chapter 2. First Encounter in Shock.
Who are you?
My eyes took a few seconds to adjust to the darkness of the room. The light coming through the crack in the door was insufficient to fully illuminate the space, but gradually the shapes began to define themselves. The environment was spacious and masculine, with dark wood furniture and minimalist decor that conveyed absolute control. Nothing there was out of place. Nothing seemed accidental. And then I saw him, with his back to me, sitting in the wheelchair in front of a window covered by heavy curtains. He didn't move when I entered, didn't say anything, didn't acknowledge my presence in any way. It was as if I were invisible or too irrelevant to deserve attention. The silence stretched for long seconds while I remained standing near the door, not knowing if I should speak first or wait for him to take the initiative. I decided to break the ice. Standing there in silence wasn't going to help anyone, and I needed to establish some kind of communication from the start. I cleared my throat and took a few more steps into the room, setting my suitcase on the floor carefully to avoid making unnecessary noise. "Mr. Pasquale?" My voice came out firm, professional, exactly as I had rehearsed mentally. "I'm Tessa Fitzgerald, your new nurse." For a moment, I thought he would simply ignore me. But then, with calculated and deliberate slowness, the wheelchair wheels began to turn. He turned to face me, and when our eyes finally met, the air was completely knocked from my lungs. Massimo Pasquale was devastatingly handsome. Not in the soft and gentle way you see in romantic movies, but in a dangerous and magnetic way that caught your gaze and wouldn't let go. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had run his hands through it several times during the day. His face was all sharp angles and a strong jawline, with stubble that only intensified the raw masculinity emanating from him. But it was his eyes that truly captured me. Dark, intense, and cold as ice. Eyes that had seen too much, done too much, and regretted nothing. He studied me from top to bottom with a deliberate slowness that made my skin tingle. It wasn't a superficial or quick look. It was a complete analysis, as if he were cataloging every detail about me and deciding whether I was worth his time, or if I would just be another disappointment on the long list of people who had already failed him. "Another one." His voice was deep, hoarse, and loaded with bitter sarcasm. "How long do you last?" The question wasn't asked with genuine curiosity. It was a challenge, a provocation. He was testing my reaction, expecting me to be intimidated or offended. But I had already been warned about this. Ramiro had made it clear that Massimo would try to push me away, make me quit like the others, and I hadn't come here to give up at the first obstacle, as long as it takes for you to get better. I responded without hesitation, keeping my tone firm but not confrontational. He tilted his head slightly to the side, his eyes narrowing as an almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his lips. It wasn't a happy or welcoming smile. It was the kind of smile dangerous people give when they find something unexpectedly interesting. Confident. He said the word slowly, savoring each syllable. "I like that. Let's see how long that confidence lasts when you discover what it really means to take care of me." I swallowed hard but didn't look away. Staring at Massimo Pasquale was like staring at a storm forming on the horizon. You knew danger was coming, but you couldn't look away. There was something magnetic about him, something that pulled you close even when your mind screamed for you to back away. "Dr. Benedetti went over your medical routine with me." I forced my voice to sound professional. trying to bring the conversation back to safe territory. Medications at 8 in the morning and 8 at night. Physical therapy twice a day and assisted bathing. We can start now if you're ready. Assisted bathing. He repeated the words, with obvious irony. What a delicate way of saying you're going to need to undress me and wash me, like a helpless child. The bitterness in his voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. I could feel the anger boiling just below the surface, the frustration of a man who had always had absolute control over everything and now found himself dependent on strangers for the most basic functions. Doctor Benedetti had been right. Massimo wasn't dealing well with forced vulnerability. That's not how I see it, I responded carefully. You're recovering from serious trauma. You need temporary assistance until you fully regain your functions. There's nothing childish about it. Temporary. He let out a dry laugh without humor. Do you really believe this is temporary? The doctor said I might never walk again, that I'd spend the rest of my life in this damn chair. So tell me, confident nurse, what makes you think you can make a difference where medicine has already failed? The question was loaded with despair, disguised as cynicism. Beneath all that hardness and sarcasm, there was a man terrified of the possibility of never being who he was before. And suddenly I understood why the other nurses hadn't lasted. They had seen the anger and interpreted it as cruelty. But anger was just the armor he wore to hide his fear. Because you still have sensation in your legs, I spoke firmly. Because the tests show progressive improvement. And mainly because you're too stubborn to accept a negative prognosis without fighting against it. He remained silent for a few seconds, watching me with an intensity that made my heart race. Then he turned the chair toward the bathroom adjoining the room and made a brusque gesture with his hand. Let's get this over with then. His voice was tense. The sooner we start, the sooner we finish. I followed him to the bathroom, trying to keep my expression neutral and professional, even as my stomach churned with nervousness. The bathroom was all white and black marble, with a large bathtub and support bars strategically installed. Everything had been adapted to his current needs, but the elegance of the space remained intact. Massimo stopped the chair near the bathtub and crossed his arms, staring at me with a silent challenge in his eyes. He was waiting for me to be uncomfortable, to hesitate or show embarrassment. But I was a nurse. I had done this dozens of times with other patients. Of course, none of them had this overwhelming presence or this gaze that seemed to penetrate through my defenses. I'm going to need you to take off your shirt first. I kept my voice firm and professional. He arched an eyebrow, clearly surprised by my direct attitude. Then, without saying anything, he began to slowly unbutton the black linen shirt he was wearing. Each button that came undone revealed more of the tanned skin underneath, and I tried to maintain my professional focus even as my heart began to beat faster. When the shirt finally fell, I had to make a conscious effort not to let my jaw drop. Massimo's body was a work of art, sculpted in defined muscles and contained power. The broad shoulders, the carved chest, the defined abs even after months without intense training. But it wasn't just the physical perfection that caught attention. It was the scars. They covered practically the entire length of his torso. Some were old, fine silvery lines that told stories of past violence. Others were recent, red and irregular marks left by surgeries and the accident that had put him in that chair. Each scar was a visual reminder of the dangerous life he led, of the battles he had faced and survived. I tried not to stare, but it was impossible not to notice. And when I raised my eyes back to his face, I saw that he was watching me intently, waiting for my reaction. Waiting for me to be shocked or feel pity, but I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. Is the water at the right temperature? I asked simply, checking the bathtub that had already been prepared earlier. He blinked, clearly not expecting me to ignore the scars so easily. It's adequate. His voice came out a little less harsh than before. I helped him transfer from the chair to the edge of the bathtub, and in that moment I needed to concentrate completely on the task at hand to avoid thinking about the proximity between our bodies or the heat emanating from his skin. His muscles contracted under my hands when I held him by the waist for support, and I felt the strength that still existed there even after months of recovery. When he finally entered the water, he let out a long sigh that sounded almost like relief. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the tension escape from his shoulders, and for the first time since I entered that room, he seemed a little less guarded, a little less in constant battle mode. I grabbed a sponge and soap and began my work with professional and efficient movements. But with each touch, I could feel him watching me. not in an invasive or disrespectful way, but with an intense curiosity that made my skin tingle. It was as if he were trying to decipher me, understand what made me different from the others. "You're not afraid." It wasn't a question. It was a statement loaded with genuine surprise. I paused for a second before responding. "Should I be?" "Most people are." He kept his eyes fixed on my face. Of me, of this situation, of what I represent. "And what do you represent?" I asked, continuing my work as I ran the sponge over his broad shoulders. He was silent for a moment. Danger, violence, the kind of life normal people avoid. "I'm not here to judge your life," I responded honestly. "I'm here to help you recover. The rest is none of my business." I saw something change in his eyes, a kind of surprise mixed with reluctant respect. He continued watching me as I worked, and the atmosphere in the bathroom seemed to grow denser with each second. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was intensely charged with something I couldn't name. When I reached the more recent scars, I hesitated for just a fraction of a second, but it was enough time for him to notice. "You can touch." His voice came out low and hoarse. "I won't break." I continued carefully, cleaning around the still sensitive surgical marks. I felt him tense slightly under my touch, but not from pain. It was something else, something deeper and more complicated. "How did you get these?" The words escaped before I could censor myself, and I immediately regretted it when I saw his expression harden. "Rule number 1, he said coldly. "No questions." I nodded quickly, returning to work in silence. But after a few minutes, when I was sure the subject was closed, I heard him speak again. "Some are from fights, others from business deals gone wrong, others from people who tried to kill me and failed." He paused, and when he continued, his voice was loaded with something dark, until they finally succeeded. "They didn't kill me, but they trapped me here. In a way, that's worse." The weight of his words hung in the humid bathroom air. I didn't know what to say. Anything that came out of my mouth would seem inadequate or condescending, so I continued my work in silence, letting him decide if he wanted to keep talking or not. "I used to have control over everything," he continued after a moment, his voice lower now. "Every move, every decision, every person around me. And now I can't even bathe myself. I can't walk without help. I can't," he paused, frustration evident in every word. "I can't be who I was." I finished washing his back and moved to stand in front of him, kneeling beside the bathtub to reach better. Our faces were dangerously close, and for the first time I could clearly see the details that the dimness of the room had hidden, the small lines around his eyes that indicated sleepless nights, the permanent tension in his jaw, the vulnerability hidden behind all that hardness. "You don't like being helpless," I stated softly. "Nobody does," he responded, but there was something deeper in his voice. "But for me it's different. My entire life was built on strength, on power, on never showing weakness, because weakness gets you killed in my world. And now," he looked at his own legs immersed in the water, "now I'm in the weakest position possible. Temporary." I repeated the word he had used before with so much sarcasm. "You're going to recover." He raised his eyes to mine, and for the first time I saw something beyond anger and cynicism. I saw fear, real, raw, and frightening. "And if I don't recover? What if the doctors are right? Then you adapt." I responded with a firmness that surprised even myself. "Because you're a survivor. That's clear in every scar on your body. You didn't get where you are by giving up when things got difficult." He stared at me for long seconds, as if searching for lies or falseness in my words. But I was being honest. I had seen enough in just this first hour to know that Massimo Pasquale was many things, but a quitter wasn't one of them. "You're different from the others," he finally said, his voice loaded with something that sounded almost like admiration. They looked at me with pity, with fear, like I was a wounded animal that could attack at any moment. "And aren't you?" I provoked lightly, trying to ease some of the tension that had settled between us. A genuine smile, small but real, touched his lips for the first time. "I am. But you apparently don't care." "I care," I corrected, running the sponge over his muscular arms. "I'm just not afraid. There's a difference." He grabbed my wrist suddenly, his strong fingers circling my skin with firm but not painful pressure. The unexpected touch made my heart race and my breath catch for a second. Our eyes met, and the air between us became electrically charged. "You should be afraid," he said low, his hoarse voice sending shivers down my spine. "I'm not a good man, Tessa, and being close to me is dangerous. I accepted that risk when I walked through that gate," I responded, my voice coming out weaker than I intended. He continued holding my wrist for a few more seconds, his thumb tracing slow circles on the inside where my pulse beat uncontrollably. Then, as quickly as he had grabbed me, he released me and leaned back in the bathtub, closing his eyes as if nothing had happened. I finished the bath in silence, my heart still beating fast and my skin tingling where he had touched me. When I helped him out of the bathtub and wrapped a large towel around his waist, I was fully aware of the proximity between our bodies, of the heat emanating from him, of the way his muscles contracted under my hands. This was dangerous, not just because of the situation or the man himself, but because of the way my body was reacting to him, the way my heart raced every time our eyes met, the way I wanted to keep touching that skin even after I had finished my work. I helped him get dressed in clean, comfortable clothes, and throughout the process he remained surprisingly quiet. He made no more sarcastic comments or provocations. He just watched me with those dark, intense eyes that seemed to see much more than I would like. "Now I need to give you your medications," I said when I finally helped him back into the wheelchair. He nodded silently and followed me back to the main bedroom. I grabbed the medication box that Dr. Benedetti had left and began separating the correct doses. 6 different pills, each with a specific function in his recovery process. Massimo took the pills I handed him and swallowed them with water without complaining. Another surprise. From what Ramiro had said, he usually resisted everything. But with me, at least in that moment, he was cooperating. "Done," I announced, putting the medications back. "Physical therapy is scheduled for 3 in the afternoon. Until then, you can rest, or if you prefer, I can read something to you." "Read to me?" He arched an eyebrow, clearly finding the suggestion absurd. "I'm not a child nurse." "I know," I responded calmly. "But spending all day with nothing to do can be boring. It's just an option." He studied me for a long moment, that penetrating gaze making me feel exposed and vulnerable. Then he turned the chair toward the window again, giving me his back exactly as he was when I first entered. "Leave me alone." His voice was back to that cold and distant tone. "I'll call you if I need something." I understood the dismissal for what it was. Our first encounter had ended and he needed space to process everything. I grabbed my suitcase and headed to the door. But before leaving, I looked back one last time. Massimo remained motionless in front of the closed window, his back rigid and shoulders tense. A powerful man trapped in a body that had betrayed him, a dangerous man forced into vulnerability. And something inside me, something I shouldn't be feeling, wanted to stay and help him carry that weight. I closed the door softly and leaned against it for a moment, trying to calm my still racing heart. The first encounter had been intense in ways I didn't expect. Massimo Pasquale was everything Camilla had said and much more. Dangerous, yes. Difficult, certainly. But also vulnerable in a way he hated to admit. And I had just accepted the challenge of caring for him for the next 3. Chapter 3. Loss of Control.
I don't need help.
The first few days at the Pasquale mansion were a delicate dance between establishing routine and navigating Massimo's unpredictable temper. I woke up at 6 in the morning, checked the medical supplies, prepared the medications, and waited until 8 to enter his room with the organized tray. He was never asleep when I arrived, always awake, always watching through the closed window, always with that tension in his shoulders that never seemed to fully ease. The routine was simple in theory: medications, breakfast, bath, morning physical therapy, lunch, rest, afternoon physical therapy, dinner, evening medications. But nothing with Massimo was truly simple. He tested every limit, questioned every instruction, and made every task harder than it needed to be. Not because he was cruel or mean, but because yielding to someone's care went against every instinct he had, developed throughout his life. On the 3rd morning, when I entered his room with the medications, I found him sitting in the chair with his arms crossed and an expression that made it clear he wasn't in the mood to cooperate. The sun was finally coming in through the curtains I had insisted on opening the day before, but the light only intensified the visible tension on his face. "Time for your medication," I announced neutrally, placing the tray on the side table and separating the pills into the correct doses. "I don't want them." The answer came dry and definitive, with no room for negotiation. I paused and looked at him directly. This was the moment the other nurses had probably backed down or tried to convince him with excessive gentleness. But I had already learned that excessive gentleness sounded like pity to Massimo, and pity was the one thing he truly hated. "It's not a matter of wanting," I responded firmly. "You need them to keep progressing. If you skip doses, you'll delay your recovery." "I don't take orders from nurses," he shot back, his eyes darkening with irritation. I held his gaze without blinking, without showing intimidation or anger. I just kept my expression calm and determined as I pushed the glass of water closer to him. "Then take them from someone who wants you walking again." The silence that followed was heavy and charged. Massimo stared at me intensely, as if trying to decide whether he should keep fighting or if it would be easier to simply give in. No one spoke to him that way. That was clear in the surprise that briefly flashed in his eyes before being replaced by something that looked like reluctant respect. Finally, with an irritated sigh, he took the pills from my hand and swallowed them all at once. He didn't say thank you, didn't acknowledge her victory, just turned the chair to the window again as if the matter were closed. And for me it was. I didn't need gratitude or acknowledgement. I just needed him to cooperate enough to recover. Physical therapy was always the hardest part of the day, not because of the physical demands, but because of how it exposed exactly how much Massimo had lost. Dr. Benedetti came 3 times a week to supervise, but on the other days it was just me and him in the adapted physical therapy room on the first floor. The room had all the necessary equipment, parallel bars for gait training, mats, light weights, and elastic bands for resistance work. That afternoon, I helped Massimo transfer from the chair to the mat on the floor. His arms were strong enough to support most of the weight, but his legs trembled visibly when he tried to use any force in them. I saw frustration grow on his face with every movement his body refused to execute the way he wanted. "Flex your right knee," I instructed, keeping my hand under his calf for support. "Slowly. Don't force beyond what you can do." He tried, and I could see the immense effort that simple movement required. The knee flexed only a few centimeters before locking, the muscles trembling with tension. Sweat began to form on his forehead as he concentrated all his strength on that. "Single movement. A little more," I encouraged gently. "You're doing it." "I'm not doing anything," he growled through clenched teeth. "This is pathetic. This is progress," I corrected, helping him relax his leg back to the starting position. "Last week you couldn't flex even this much. You're improving." He let out a bitter laugh without humor. "Improving. I used to run 5 kilometers every morning. I used to train boxing for 2 hours. I used to control everything. Everyone." His voice was loaded with anger and defeat. "Now I can't even bend my own damn leg without shaking like a child." I sat beside him on the mat, maintaining a respectful but present distance. "You suffered serious trauma. Your body is rebuilding from scratch. That takes time." "Time?" He spat the word like it was poison. "Time I don't have. While I'm here trapped in this chair, my enemies are organizing. My business is being neglected. My power is being questioned. And you regaining the ability to walk will solve." "All of that?" I asked, genuinely curious about his logic. He turned his head to look at me, and for the first time I saw beyond the anger. I saw the deep fear he hid beneath all that hardness. In my world, weakness is a death sentence, and being in this chair is the greatest weakness possible. "Then stop seeing it as weakness," I responded firmly. "You survived something that should have killed you. You're fighting every day to recover. That's not weakness. That's strength." Massimo was silent for a long moment, processing my words. Then, with visible effort, he tried to flex his knee again. This time he managed to go a little further before locking. Not much, but enough to be noticeable. When he finally relaxed his leg, there was renewed determination in his eyes. "Again," he ordered, his voice tense but resolute. We worked for another 40 minutes, each exercise being a battle against his own body's limitations. I could see frustration grow with every movement that didn't come out perfect, but I could also see the stubborn refusal to give up. Massimo was used to winning through brute force and absolute determination, and he was applying that same approach to his recovery. When we finally finished, he was exhausted and sweaty, but there was something different in his expression. It wasn't exactly hope, but it was less defeatist than in previous days. I helped him back into the chair and pushed him to his room, where I left him to rest before dinner. "You're going to recover," I said before leaving. And this time, it wasn't just empty encouragement. It was a statement based on what I was seeing. On his determination. On the gradual but real improvement that was happening every day. He didn't respond, but I saw his shoulders relax slightly when I closed the door. It was progress, small but real. Night had fallen completely when I heard the noise. I was in the room they had assigned to me, 2 hallways ahead of Massimo's room, reviewing the day's notes when a dull thud echoed through the silent floor. My heart immediately raced. I dropped the notebook and ran down the hallway toward the sound. Massimo's bedroom door was ajar, and when I entered, I found the scene that confirmed my worst fears. He was on the floor beside the bed, the wheelchair turned over a few meters away. He had tried to transfer himself from the chair to the bed and had obviously lost his balance. His hands were braced on the floor, his arms trembling with the effort of supporting himself while his legs remained inert beneath him. The anger and humiliation on his face were palpable when our eyes met. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. The expression said everything. Don't you dare pity me. Don't you dare treat me as incapable. Don't you dare make this worse than it already is. Without saying a word, I approached and crouched beside him. I didn't ask if he was okay. Didn't offer condolences or excessive concern. I just positioned my body to give support and extended my arms to help him up. I'm going to hold you by the waist. I explained in a neutral and professional voice. Use your arms to push yourself up and I'll stabilize you. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Together we managed to get him off the floor. His arms were strong enough to do most of the work, and I just offered the balance and support that his legs couldn't provide. When I finally got him sitting on the edge of the bed, we were both breathing heavily from the effort. Massimo kept his head down, dark hair falling over his eyes while his hands gripped the sheets with enough force to turn his knuckles white. Tension emanated from him in waves, and I could feel the internal battle happening as he fought against the humiliation of having been found in that position. This doesn't leave this room. His voice came out hoarse and low, loaded with both command and plea. I turned the wheelchair back to the correct position and placed it beside the bed, checking the brakes before responding. What doesn't leave? The question made him raise his head, confusion briefly flashing in his dark eyes. I kept my expression completely neutral, as if I really didn't understand what he was talking about. As if I hadn't just found him fallen on the floor. As if nothing special had happened. Slow understanding emerged on his face when he realized what I was doing. I wasn't going to use that moment against him. I wasn't going to keep it as proof of weakness or use it to gain power over him. For me, that had never happened. It was just another night in the routine. Nothing. He finally responded, his voice a little less tense. Nothing leaves. I nodded as if the conversation made perfect sense and headed to the door. Need anything before bed? Water? Extra pain medication? No. The answer came quickly. Then after a pause, he added more quietly, Thank you. It was the first time he had thanked me for anything since I arrived. I didn't make a big event of it, just nodded and closed the door softly behind me. But when I returned to my own room and leaned against the closed door, I allowed myself to feel the weight of that moment. Massimo Pasquale was fighting a battle against his own body, and it was the hardest battle he had probably ever faced because he couldn't win it through intimidation, power, or violence. He had to win it through patience, hard work, and accepting help. 3 things that went completely against his nature. But he was trying, reluctantly and frustratedly, but trying, and something in me wanted to be there for every step of that journey, even knowing that getting too close to that dangerous man would probably be the biggest mistake of my life. The following days brought a subtle but noticeable change in the dynamic between us. Massimo was still rude and impatient, still tested limits and resisted the routine, but there was less venom in his words, less automatic rejection of everything I suggested. He began to cooperate a little more during physical therapy, to complain a little less about the medications, to allow small conversations during meals. It wasn't friendship. We were still firmly in professional territory, but it was mutual respect beginning to form. He respected that I didn't treat him with pity or fear, and I respected that he was fighting every day against adversities that would have broken lesser men. In Friday's physical therapy session that week, something different happened. We were working on the parallel bars, with Massimo using his arms to support himself while trying to take small steps with his legs. It was a brutally difficult exercise that always left him frustrated, but he insisted on trying every day. Transfer the weight to your right leg, I instructed, keeping my hands ready to hold him in case he lost his balance. Slowly, Feel the muscles working." He did what I asked, and for the first time in weeks, his right leg actually supported part of the weight. Not much and only for a few seconds, but it was real. I saw surprise cross his face, followed quickly by fierce determination. "Again?" he ordered, breathing heavy, but eyes shining with something approaching hope. We worked for another 20 minutes, each small victory building on the previous one. When we finally stopped, exhausted but visibly satisfied, he looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't the cold and calculating look or the barely contained anger. It was something softer, more human. "You were right," he admitted reluctantly, "about me being too stubborn to stay down." And then it happened. Small, almost imperceptible, but undeniably real. A smile. Genuine and brief, but a true smile that completely transformed his face. It made the hard lines soften, the dark eyes shine with something beyond anger or pain, and my heart, traitorous and inconvenient, skipped a beat in my chest. This was dangerous, not the man himself. Although he was obviously dangerous in dozens of different ways. But the way I was beginning to see him, the way that rare smile affected me, the way I was starting to look forward to the moments when his guard dropped a little and I could glimpse the man behind all that armor, I needed to be careful. Massimo Pasquale wasn't my friend. He was nothing more than my temporary patient. In 3 months, I would leave that mansion and return to my normal life, and he would continue being the dangerous man he always was. Involving emotions in that equation would be catastrophic. But when he smiled again a few days later during another successful physical therapy session, when his eyes met mine with something that seemed like genuine gratitude, I knew it was already too late. The lines between professional and personal were beginning to blur, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Chapter 4. Revealed Vulnerability.
Don't pity me.
The second week at the Pasquale mansion brought subtle but significant changes to the routine we had established. Massimo was still temperamental and difficult, but moments of cooperation began to outweigh those of resistance. Physical therapy showed visible and measurable progress, with sensation in his legs gradually returning and muscle strength increasing with each session. But more than the physical improvements, it was his emotional transformation that really caught my attention. Evening was falling when I entered his room with dinner. Normally he ate alone, preferring privacy to accompanied meals. But that night when I placed the tray on the table and turned to leave, his voice stopped me halfway. "Stay." The word wasn't exactly a request, but it wasn't an order either. It was something in between, loaded with a hesitation that was completely atypical for him. I turned slowly, surprised by the request. Massimo was sitting near the window, the curtains open, revealing the illuminated garden outside. The soft evening light painted his profile golden, softening the hard lines of his face and creating an almost peaceful atmosphere that contrasted completely with the constant tension that normally filled that room. "You want me to stay?" I asked, just to confirm I had understood correctly. He didn't look at me directly, keeping his eyes fixed on the window, as if the landscape outside were infinitely more interesting than our conversation. "I'm tired of eating alone, of being alone. Stay and keep me company." There was vulnerability in those words that he probably hated to admit. Massimo Pasquale wasn't the type of man who asked for company or admitted loneliness. But the months of forced isolation, constant dependence, and daily battle against his own body were beginning to crack the armor he kept around himself. I grabbed the chair from the corner and positioned it near him, sitting with my hands folded in my lap as I watched him begin to eat in silence. For several minutes, neither of us said anything, the only sound being the clinking of silverware against the plate and the distant singing of birds outside. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was almost contemplative, as if we were both gathering courage to cross an invisible line that separated professional from personal. "You want to know how it happened?" Massimo finally broke the silence, his voice low but clear. "The accident." My heart sped up slightly. During all the weeks I'd spent there, he had never offered details about what had put him in that chair. Dr. Benedetti had mentioned an explosion. Ramiro had hinted at violence, but no one had given the complete story. And I had quickly learned that asking direct questions only made Massimo close, up completely. "If you want to tell me." I responded carefully, making it clear I wasn't pressuring, but that I was willing to listen. He put his fork aside and leaned back in his chair, eyes still fixed on the window, but his expression becoming darker and more distant. It was an ambush, rival familia. They'd been planning for months, waiting for the right moment to attack. He paused, and I could see tension grow in his shoulders as he revisited obviously painful memories. I didn't interrupt him, just waited patiently for him to continue in his own time. Forcing him to talk would be counterproductive. He needed to feel he was in control of the narrative, that he was choosing to share instead of being interrogated. I was coming back from a business meeting. He continued after a moment. I was alone in the car, which was a mistake. I always had security, always took precautions. But that night I was too confident, too arrogant. The bitterness in his voice was palpable. I thought no one would be bold enough to attack me directly. And they were. I completed softly. He nodded, fingers drumming on the chair's armrest with repressed nervousness. They blocked the road. When I realized the trap, it was already too late. The explosion hit the car full force. I don't remember much after that. Just the pain, the twisted metal, the smell of gasoline and smoke. My stomach turned imagining the scene. The violence of the attack, the terror of those moments, the certainty of death he must have felt. How did you survive? Ramiro. The answer came quickly. He was following me at a distance. Standard protocol even when I thought I was alone. He arrived seconds after the explosion and pulled me from the wreckage before. The car caught fire completely. The doctors said one more minute and I would have died. He finally turned his face to look at me, and the raw intensity in his eyes made my heart tighten. They took me straight to surgery. 5 different procedures that first night. The doctors didn't think I'd survive the first 24 hours. But I survived. And then they said you'd never walk again. I connected the dots based on what Dr. Benedetti had mentioned. Massimo let out a dry laugh without humor. Permanent paralysis of the lower limbs. That was the official diagnosis. They said the spinal cord damage was too extensive for complete recovery, that I should accept my new reality and adapt to the wheelchair. The anger and determination that shone in his eyes when he said those words were so intense, they could almost be touched. He wasn't the type of man who accepted limitations imposed by others, even when those others were specialist doctors with decades of experience. For Massimo, impossible was just another challenge to be overcome through pure willpower. But you're going to prove them wrong. It wasn't a question. It was a statement based on everything I had seen in recent weeks. I'm going to prove all of them wrong, he confirmed with fierce conviction. Because staying in this chair forever isn't an option. Not in my world. Not with the enemies I have. There was so much weight in those words, so much fear hidden beneath the bravado. He wasn't just fighting to walk again out of pride or vanity. He was fighting for survival, because in his world, as he had already told me before, weakness was a death sentence, and being trapped in a wheelchair made him vulnerable in ways he had never been before. You're going to make it, I said firmly, and this time it wasn't just empty encouragement. It was conviction based on the progress I saw every day, on his unwavering determination, on his stubborn refusal to give up. Because you're a fighter, you always have been. He studied me in silence for long seconds, that penetrating gaze that seemed to see much more than I was showing. Then surprisingly, a small but genuine smile touched his lips. You see me as a fighter. Most people see me as a criminal, as a monster. You can be both, I responded honestly. But the fighter is what matters now. It's what's going to get you out of that chair. His smile grew slightly, reaching his eyes for the first time since we met. And my heart, traitorous and inconvenient, responded by racing inside my chest. This was getting dangerous, not just the physical proximity or the situation itself, but the way I was beginning to see him, the way each moment of his vulnerability made my defenses crumble a little more. Massimo resumed his meal, but the atmosphere in the room had changed completely. The weight of loneliness that always hung there had dissipated, replaced by something lighter, more connected, as if sharing that story had created a bridge between us that hadn't existed before. Why nursing? He asked suddenly, catching me by surprise with the change of subject. Of all possible careers, why choose to take care of people? The question was simple, but the answer was complex, intertwined with memories and motivations I rarely shared. But if he had opened up to me about his trauma, it seemed fair to reciprocate with a bit of my own story. My grandmother, I began, feeling the familiarity of the memory warm me inside. She had a stroke when I was 16. She spent the last 3 years of her life dependent on constant care. I helped my mother take care of her, and it was during that time that I realized the impact that nurses and caregivers had not just on her physical health, but on her dignity and quality of life. Massimo had stopped eating, his attention completely focused on me now. There was no judgment in his eyes, just genuine curiosity and something that seemed like respect for my choice. She used to say that the best nurses weren't the ones with the most technical knowledge, but the ones who treated their patients as complete people instead of just sick bodies, I continued, feeling my voice become softer with the emotion of the memory. I wanted to be that kind of professional, someone who helped people not just heal physically, but maintain their dignity during the process. Even dangerous people like me? He asked, and there was something vulnerable in the way he asked the question. As if he were genuinely curious whether I saw value in helping him, or if I was just there for the money, especially people like you. I responded without hesitation. Everyone deserves the chance to recover, to go back to being who they were, or even become someone better. It doesn't matter what they did in the past. The silence that followed was loaded with meaning. Massimo stared at me with an intensity that made my skin tingle, as if trying to figure out whether I really believed those words, or if I was just saying what he wanted to hear. But I was being completely honest. My work had never been about judging. It was about healing. You're different from anyone I've ever met. He finally said, his voice low and hoarse, "In my world, kindness is seen as weakness. Gentleness is exploited, but you're kind without being weak. You're strong without being cruel. How do you do that?" The question caught me off guard. No one had ever questioned me about the balance I tried to maintain between firmness and compassion. It was something that came naturally to me, developed through years of experience caring for difficult patients in complicated situations. "I think it's because I don't see kindness as weakness," I responded. Thoughtfully, "I see kindness as strength, as a conscious choice to treat people with humanity even when it would be easier to be harsh or distant." Massimo continued watching me with that penetrating gaze, processing my words with the same intensity he applied to everything in his life. Then slowly he extended his hand and took mine where it rested in my lap. The touch was unexpected and made my heart race instantly. His fingers were warm and calloused, strong even after months of forced inactivity. He traced small circles on the back of my hand with his thumb, an almost unconscious gesture that sent shivers down my spine. The atmosphere in the room changed again, becoming electrically charged with something that went far beyond gratitude or friendship. "You're saving me," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving mine. In a way I never thought I'd need to be saved. My heart was beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. I should pull my hand away, re-establish the professional boundaries that were clearly being crossed, but I couldn't move. I couldn't break that moment of deep and dangerous connection forming between us. The following nights brought more conversations. Massimo began asking me to stay after dinner, and our routine expanded to include those quiet hours when his defenses lowered a bit and I could see beyond the armor. He told me about his childhood in Italy, about how he had been recruited into the Familia while still young, about the choices that led him to become who he was today. And I shared stories from my own life, the challenges of growing up without much money but with lots of love, the dreams I had for my future. They were conversations that brought us closer in ways that went far beyond what was appropriate for nurse and patient. But neither of us could stop. There was a hunger there, a need for connection that we had both denied for too long. For him out of survival necessity in a brutal world, for me out of complete focus on my professional goals. It was on a Thursday night, almost 3 weeks after my arrival, that things almost crossed a line from which there would be no return. We were in his room after the evening physical therapy session. Massimo had progressed to the point of being able to stand for short periods, using only a cane for support. It was immense progress, and he was visibly proud of himself. "Let me try alone," he said when I approached to help him stand from the chair. "Just stay close in case I lose my balance." I nodded and took a step back, keeping my hands ready but giving him the space he needed. Massimo gripped the cane firmly and began to push himself up. The muscles in his arms and legs contracted with effort, and for one glorious moment he stood completely upright, supporting his own weight without help. The pride and triumph that shone in his eyes were so intense they took my breath. Away. It was the first time he had managed to do this alone, and the raw emotion of that moment was palpable in the air between us. But then he tried to take a step and his right leg trembled dangerously. He lost his balance forward and I reacted instantly, taking a step forward and wrapping my arms around his waist to stabilize him. Massimo dropped the cane and his hands found my shoulders, gripping tight as he tried to regain balance. And suddenly we were dangerously close, our bodies pressed against each other, our faces only centimeters apart. I could feel the heat emanating from him, the solid weight of his body against mine, the strength of his muscles even through the temporary fragility. My heart was beating so fast it seemed to want to leap from my chest and my breathing had become shallow and irregular. His eyes were fixed on mine, dark and intense, burning with something that went far beyond gratitude or appreciation. "I've never been saved by anyone," he whispered, his hoarse voice making each word vibrate through me. "I've always been the one saving others, protecting, controlling. But you..." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. I understood what he was trying to say. Understood because I felt the same thing, that dangerous and impossible connection growing between us, that attraction that went against all logic and professionalism. "I've never been this close to anyone like you," he continued, one of his hands leaving my shoulder and rising to touch my face with surprising gentleness. Not just physically, but really, in a way that matters. My heart was beating so hard I could barely think. Straight, I should pull away. I should re-establish professional boundaries and remind us both why this couldn't happen. But my body wasn't listening to my mind. My eyes dropped to his lips for a fraction of a second, and I saw when he saw desire ignite in his dark eyes. He began to lean forward, and I didn't pull away. Didn't put distance between us as I should. Just stood there, trapped in that moment charged with tension and possibility, my heart screaming yes while my mind whispered no. His lips were millimeters from mine when a loud knock on the door made us jump. Apart as if we'd been burned. Massimo almost lost his balance again, and I had to quickly stabilize him, putting appropriate distance between our bodies while my heart still raced, uncontrollably. "Sir," Ramiro's voice came from the other side of the door. "I need to speak with you about tomorrow's business." Massimo let out a low word, in Italian that was definitely a curse. His frustration was palpable, but he quickly recomposed his expression, returning to the mask of control he normally wore. "Come in." I took advantage of the interruption to take a few more steps back, creating professional distance between us while trying to calm my racing heart and normalize my breathing. Ramiro entered with a folder under his arm, his perceptive eyes quickly passing from Massimo to me and back, if he noticed the tension in the air or the suspicious proximity between us. Seconds before, he had the wisdom not to comment. "I'll let you talk," I said quickly, walking toward the door on legs that still trembled slightly. "Tessa." Massimo's voice stopped me when I was almost out. I turned to face him, and the look he gave me was loaded with both promise and warning. "Thank you for everything." The words were simple, but the meaning behind them was complex. Thank you for holding me, for saving me, for being here, for almost kissing me, for being you. I nodded silently and left, closing the door softly behind me. When I reached my room and leaned against the closed door, I let my head fall back and closed my eyes, trying to process what had almost happened. We had almost kissed. And the worst part was that I wanted to. God, how I wanted to. Every fiber of my being had screamed to close that distance, to feel his lips against mine, to discover if the kiss would be as intense as the tension between us. But I couldn't. He was my patient. I had professional responsibilities. And more importantly, Massimo Pasquale was dangerous in ways that went far beyond the physical. He was the type of man who consumed you completely, who changed you in fundamental ways. And getting involved with him that way would be disastrous for my heart and probably for my life. But when I closed my eyes that night, all I could see was the intensity in his eyes when we were centimeters apart. All I could feel was the heat of his body against mine. And all I could think about was how different it would be if Ramiro hadn't interrupted. If we had crossed that line from which there would be no return. And the scariest part was that, despite all common sense and professionalism, part of me still wanted to find out. Chapter 5. First Kiss and Boundaries.
Come closer.
The days following that night were loaded with a tension neither of us knew how to undo. The almost kiss that Ramiro had interrupted hung between Massimo and me like an unfulfilled promise, creating an electrically charged atmosphere every time we were in the same space. He watched me with a new intensity, dark eyes following my every movement during physical therapy sessions, during baths, during meals, and I pretended not to notice while my heart raced every time our gazes met. Physical therapy continued showing impressive progress. Massimo could stand for increasingly longer periods, and the strength in his legs was visibly increasing each day. Dr. Benedetti was impressed with the speed of recovery and attributed much of it to the patient's fierce determination. But I knew there was something more motivating Massimo beyond the simple desire to walk. There was a new fire burning in him, an urgency that didn't exist before. It was Friday afternoon, almost a month since my arrival, when everything finally reached the breaking point. The physical therapy session had been particularly intense and successful. Massimo had managed to take 3 complete steps using only the cane for balance, without needing my physical support. It was a significant milestone, and the emotion on his face when he accomplished. The feat was so pure and genuine it made my chest tighten. When we returned to his room after the session, there was something different in the air, an electric charge that made my skin tingle and my heart beat erratically. Massimo transferred from the chair to the armchair near the window, his movements more confident now that he had recovered a significant part of his muscle strength. I should have left at that moment, given him space to rest before dinner. But my feet seemed glued to the floor. "Stay," he said for the 3rd time that week, and this time there was something different in his voice, something urgent and vulnerable at the same time. "Please." The word please coming from Massimo Pasquale was so rare it made me pause completely. He wasn't a man to ask favors or show need. But there he was, looking at me with those dark eyes full of something that seemed like contained desperation, asking for my company as if it were the only thing that mattered in that moment. I sat on the edge of the bed, maintaining a respectable distance, but still within the intimate space of his room. Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was loaded with everything we weren't saying, with everything we felt but couldn't admit out loud. "I'm thinking about you." Massimo finally broke the silence, his voice low and hoarse. "All the time, during physical therapy, during meals, during the night when I should be sleeping, I can only think about you." My heart raced in my chest and my mouth suddenly went dry. I should stop that conversation immediately, re-establish the professional boundaries that were clearly being violated. But the words that came out of my mouth were completely different from what my rational mind ordered. "I think about you too," I admitted in a low voice, feeling my face heat with the confession, more than I should. His eyes lit up with something intense and hungry when he heard my admission. He leaned forward in the armchair, eliminating part of the distance between us, and when he spoke again, his voice was loaded with raw emotion. "This is wrong." He said the words, but his tone carried no conviction. "You're my nurse, I'm your patient. There are lines we shouldn't cross." "I know," I responded, my hands nervously gripping the fabric of my clothes. "But apparently knowing it's wrong doesn't change what we feel." He let out a low laugh without humor. "Everything in my life is wrong, Tessa. The choices I've made, the things I've done, the world I live in, everything is wrong and dark and violent." He paused and his eyes met mine with devastating intensity. "But you're the only right thing that's ever entered my life." The words hit me like a punch to the chest, stealing all the air from my lungs. There was so much raw truth in those words, so much vulnerability he normally hid beneath layers of control and hardness, and I had no defense against that. I had no way to resist when he opened up that way. "Massimo," I began, but didn't know how to finish the sentence. Didn't know if I was going to protest or agree, or simply let my heart dictate the words. He stood from the armchair, leaning on the cane but moving with determination in my direction. Each step was measured and careful, but there was purpose in every movement. When he finally reached where I sat on the edge of the bed, he stopped in front of me and carefully set the cane on the floor. Then, holding my shoulder for balance, he sat beside me. We were dangerously close now, our bodies touching lightly, his heat enveloping me completely. My heart was beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. Massimo raised a hand and touched my face with a gentleness that contrasted completely with the hardness he normally emanated. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his eyes fixed on mine while his thumb slowly traced my cheek. "Tell me this can't happen and I'll stop. I'll keep my distance. I'll be just your patient." I should say exactly that. Should establish the boundaries that needed to exist between us. But when I opened my mouth, the words that came out were completely different. "I can't," I admitted in a low voice, my breath catching when I felt his fingers slide through my hair. "I can't ask you to stop when that's exactly what I want to." It was all he needed to hear. Massimo tilted his face toward mine, eliminating the distance between us with agonizing slowness that made each second seem like an eternity. And then, finally, his lips touched mine and the entire world seemed to stop. The kiss started gentle, almost hesitant, as if we were both testing unknown territory. But the gentleness lasted only seconds before being consumed by the hunger we'd been suppressing for weeks. His lips moved against mine with growing urgency, and I responded with equal intensity, my hands rising to hold his face as I surrendered completely to that moment. It was desperate and passionate and absolutely devastating. Months of unresolved tension exploding in a single kiss that seemed to burn through all my defenses. His hand was in my hair, the other on my waist pulling me closer, and I couldn't think about anything except the feeling of his lips against mine, the taste of him, the heat consuming every inch of my body. When we finally separated, we were both breathing heavily, our foreheads touching as we tried to catch our breath and process what had just happened. My heart was beating so wildly it seemed to want to escape from my chest. "This is wrong," I managed to say between irregular breaths, but my hands still held his face, completely contradicting my words. "Probably," Massimo agreed, his voice hoarse and loaded. "But I don't care. I'm your nurse. This is professional and shouldn't—" "Stop lying!" He interrupted me, his dark eyes burning into mine. "To yourself and to me. You feel this too. This connection, this need. Stop pretending you don't feel it." He was right and we both knew it. There was no denying what was between us. Not after that kiss. Not after weeks building this impossible tension. But admitting it out loud would make everything real in a way that scared me. Deeply. "I feel it," I finally admitted, my voice trembling slightly. "But Massimo, this is complicated. I'm here for 3 months. My life is out there. My career, my school, my plans, and you have your own world. A dangerous world I'm not part of." Something darkened in his eyes when I mentioned the 3 months, as if the reminder that our situation was temporary was a physical blow. His hands gripped my waist tighter, possessiveness clear in the gesture. 3 months, he repeated the phrase with bitterness, as if 3 months were enough time for what I'm feeling. My heart ached, painfully in my chest. "What are you feeling?" He held my face with both hands, forcing me to look at him directly. "Something that goes far beyond physical attraction. Something that scares me because I've never felt it before. You entered my life when I was at my worst moment, and instead of treating me like a charity project or dangerous threat, you treated me like a person. You saw beyond the man in the wheelchair, beyond the criminal, beyond everything people normally see when they look at me." His words were so raw and honest they made my eyes burn with unshed tears. I had never seen Massimo so vulnerable, so open with his emotions. And that made everything infinitely harder, because I couldn't simply dismiss what I felt as superficial attraction or forced proximity. "I don't know how to do this," I confessed honestly. "How to balance what I feel with what I should do, with my professional responsibilities." "Then don't balance," he suggested, his voice low but intense. "Just feel, just live, at least while we're still together." And then he kissed me again, and all my doubts and worries dissolved under the intensity of that touch. It wasn't gentle or hesitant this time. It was pure need and pent-up desire finally finding release. My fingers tangled in his hair as I responded with equal hunger, losing myself completely in the sensation of being in his arms. The rest of the day passed in a blur of unresolved tension. After those kisses, we established a tacit agreement to keep our distance for the rest of the afternoon, both needing space to process what had happened and what it meant for us. But the tension was there, vibrating in the air every time our gazes crossed during dinner. When night fell and I gave Massimo his evening medications, the atmosphere in the room was charged again. He held my hand when I extended the pills, his fingers wrapping around my wrist with firm but gentle pressure. "Stay a little longer." It wasn't a request. It was a plea disguised as a command. But this time I knew that staying would be dangerous, that we would cross more lines we couldn't come back from. "Massimo, I need to... please." The word came out low and loaded with vulnerability. "Just a few more minutes. It doesn't have to be anything more than being here. How could I refuse when he asked that way? I sat in the armchair near the window, maintaining safe physical distance while we talked about trivial things. About his progress in physical therapy, about the weather, about absolutely nothing important. But beneath the surface of casual conversation, there were deep currents of everything we weren't saying. When I finally stood to leave, it was past midnight. Massimo accompanied me to the door, leaning on the cane, his movements increasingly confident. I stopped at the doorframe and turned to say goodnight, but the words died in my throat when I saw the way he was looking at me. "Good night, Massimo," I finally managed to whisper. "Good night, Tessa." He responded, but there was promise in those words. Promise that this was far from over. I returned to my room and threw myself on the bed, heart still racing and lips still tingling from the memory of his kisses. I had crossed a line I swore I'd never cross. I had gotten emotionally involved with my patient in a way that went completely against my professional ethics, and the scariest part was that I didn't regret it. I was almost falling asleep when I heard a sound coming from the hallway. Slow and deliberate footsteps. I sat up in bed, heart racing when I realized someone was approaching my room. And then the door opened slowly, revealing Massimo standing there, leaning on the cane, dark eyes shining in the dimness. "I can't sleep," he admitted, his hoarse voice breaking the silence of the night. "I keep thinking about what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. He entered the room, closing the door softly behind him. Each step in my direction made my heart beat faster, my breathing become more irregular. When he reached near the bed, he stopped and looked at me with devastating intensity. "How you taste," he said low, each word loaded with raw desire. "How you feel, what it would be like to kiss you again without guilt or hesitation." I should send him away, should establish the boundaries that needed to exist. But when he sat on the edge of my bed, setting the cane on the floor, all I could do was move closer to him as if it were inevitable, as if the gravity between us were too strong to resist. "Massimo, this is dangerous." I tried to protest one last time, but my voice was weak and without conviction. "I know," he agreed, his hand reaching for my face in the darkness. "But I can't stay away from you. I've tried. It doesn't work." And then he kissed me again, and this time there was no hesitation or doubt. It was pure need and desire, longer and hungrier than the previous kisses. His hands were in my hair, on my waist, pulling me closer as if he couldn't get enough, and I responded with equal intensity, completely lost in the sensation of being in his arms. When we finally separated, both breathing heavily, I knew I had crossed the point of no return. There was no going back now. There was no pretending this was just forced proximity or superficial attraction. It was deep and real and absolutely terrifying. "Massimo, we can't." I tried to protest weakly, but my hands still held his face, contradicting my words. "We can't what?" he challenged, his voice hoarse against my lips. "Want each other? Because it's too late for that. I already want you. More than I should. More than is safe." And as he kissed me again in the darkness of my room, I knew he was right. It was too late to pull back. We were already deeply involved in something that could destroy us. But in that moment, with his lips on mine and his heart beating against mine, I couldn't bring myself to care about the consequences. Chapter 6. Extreme Sensual Tension.
Stay with me.
Stay with me.
The days following those nighttime kisses were the hardest since my arrival at the mansion. The tension between Massimo and me had reached levels impossible to ignore, transforming every routine interaction into something electrically charged and dangerous. We hadn't crossed the final line, but the kisses in the darkness of my room had opened a door that neither of us could close again. He had returned to his room that night, leaning on the cane and casting looks at me that promised continuation. And since then, every moment we spent together was saturated with unresolved desire and growing need that turned even the simplest tasks into exercises in self-control. Bath time, which before was just another medical routine, had transformed into delicious and agonizing torture for both of us. On Monday morning, when I entered Massimo's room to help him with his daily bath, the atmosphere was already charged before I even said good morning. He watched me from the wheelchair with those intense dark eyes that seemed to see through all my defenses. "Good morning." I forced my voice to sound professional and neutral as I prepared the towels and adjusted the water temperature. "Ready for your bath?" "Always ready to keep up appearances." "Aren't you?" he responded with obvious irony. But there was heat beneath the words, pretending nothing's changed between us. I ignored the comment and approached, to help him stand. But when my hands touched his waist for support, I felt my entire body react to the contact. My heart immediately accelerated and my breathing became irregular. It was impossible to touch Massimo now without remembering what it had been like, to kiss him, without wanting to do it again. When I helped him into the bathtub, I tried to keep my focus completely professional, look only where necessary, touch only what was strictly necessary to do my job. But it was useless. Every inch of his skin seemed to call for my attention. Every defined muscle a reminder of the strength that existed in that body, even after months of recovery. I grabbed the sponge and began washing his shoulders with mechanical and efficient movements, determined to maintain some appearance of professional distance. But I felt my hands trembling slightly when the sponge slid over his chest, tracing the lines of muscles and contouring the scars I knew so well now. "You're trembling." Massimo's voice was low and observant, loaded with something that sounded dangerously close to satisfaction. "I'm fine," I responded quickly, trying to steady my hands and maintain focus on the task. He suddenly grabbed my wrist, making the sponge fall into the water as his fingers wrapped around my skin with firm pressure. He forced me to look at him directly, and what I saw in those dark eyes made my stomach flip. Raw and intense desire, barely contained beneath the surface of control he was trying to maintain. "Are you?" he challenged, his thumb tracing circles on the inside of my wrist where my pulse beat, uncontrollably. "Because I'm not fine. Not at all." I swallowed hard, trying to find words that wouldn't come. Massimo pulled my hand closer, pressing my palm against his chest where I could feel his heart beating as fast as mine. The intimacy of the gesture, the vulnerability of letting me feel how affected he was devastating. "Every time you touch me," he continued, his voice becoming hoarser with each word. "I want more. Every time you're near, I have to hold myself back from pulling you to me. Every time you leave the room, I'm counting the minutes until I can see you again." My heart was beating so hard I could barely breathe properly. I should pull my hand back, re-establish the boundaries that needed to exist. But instead, I let my palm stay pressed against his chest, feeling each accelerated beat of the heart that mirrored mine. "Massimo?" My voice came out weak and without conviction. "This is temporary." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes when he heard that word. He released my wrist only to take my face with both hands, forcing me to maintain eye contact as he spoke with devastating intensity. "Temporary." He repeated the word with evident bitterness. "My recovery? Or this?" He made a gesture between us, indicating the impossible connection that had formed. "Because I don't want this to be temporary, Tessa. And you don't either." "Both." I tried to respond firmly, but my voice faltered completely on the last word, betraying the lie. Massimo let out a low laugh without humor, his eyes never leaving mine. "Liar, you feel this as intensely as I do. The difference is I'm not afraid to admit it." Before I could respond, the sharp sound of my cell phone ringing cut through the tension in the air. Massimo released me reluctantly, and I stepped away from the bathtub on trembling legs, grabbing the phone I had left on the counter. Camilla's name was glowing on the screen. "I need to answer." I said more to myself than to him. Massimo just nodded, but his eyes remained fixed on me as I left the bathroom for privacy. I answered the call in his room, trying to calm my breathing before speaking. "Hi, Cammy." "Finally." My friend's voice sounded relieved and worried at the same time. "You haven't answered my calls in days." I was starting to think something had happened. I ran my hand over my face, feeling guilty for having neglected contact. "Sorry, it's been intense here." "Intense how?" Camilla asked immediately, her protective instinct kicking in. "How's the work? Is he treating you well?" I hesitated for a fraction of a second, and in that pause I felt Massimo's presence behind me. He had gotten out of the bathtub and approached silently, leaning on the cane, wearing only a towel wrapped around his waist. Drops of water still ran down his broad shoulders and defined chest, and my heart raced again just seeing him there. "Yes," I finally responded, very conscious that Massimo was listening to every word. "He treats me well." Massimo came closer, getting dangerously near while his dark eyes studied me with intensity. Then, low enough for only me to hear but clearly wanting me to repeat it to Camilla, he whispered against my ear in a way that sent shivers down my entire spine. "Tell her I treat you very well." His voice was loaded with double meaning. With promise and memory of the kisses we shared, my face heated completely and I had to turn my back to him to be able to continue the conversation without my voice betraying exactly how affected I was. "How's his recovery?" Camilla continued, oblivious to the tension vibrating in the room. "Still difficult?" "Complicated," I responded, choosing the word carefully. "But there's progress, quite a bit of progress." I felt Massimo come closer, the heat of his body radiating even without direct contact. His hands landed on my shoulders, thumbs tracing slow circles that made my skin tingle through my clothes. This wasn't fair. He knew exactly what he was doing to me. "Tess, you sound strange." The concern in Camilla's voice increased. "Are you sure everything's okay? You can leave there anytime if things get uncomfortable." "Everything's fine." I responded too quickly, betraying my own nerves. "Just tired. The routine is intense." "Okay." Camilla didn't sound completely convinced. "But call me if you need anything." "Seriously, Tess. Anything." I promised I would call and hung up, letting the phone drop on the bed while trying to recover my composure. Massimo's hands were still on my shoulders, firm and warm. And when I finally turned to face him, the intensity in his gaze almost made me lose my balance. "Complicated." He repeated the word I used with Camilla, a dangerous smile touching his lips. "Is that how you describe what's between us?" "How would you describe it?" I challenged back, trying to maintain some control over the situation, even as my heart beat uncontrollably. He pulled me closer, eliminating any distance that still existed between our bodies. His hand rose to touch my face, his thumb tracing my lower lip with a delicacy that contrasted completely with the burning intensity in his eyes. "Inevitable," he responded low. "Consuming, absolutely impossible to resist." And then he kissed me with a hunger that took any rational thought from my head. My hands rose to his wet chest, feeling the muscles contract under my palm, and I responded to the kiss with equal intensity. It was wrong and complicated and completely professionally inappropriate, but neither of us could stop. When we finally separated, both breathing heavily, I knew I was lost. Completely and irrevocably lost in that dangerous man who shouldn't mean anything more than a temporary job. The rest of the day passed in a fog loaded with unresolved tension. Every glance exchanged during lunch was full of promises. Every touch during the afternoon physical therapy sent electricity through my skin. Every word had double meaning that we both understood perfectly. When night fell, it brought with it an unexpected storm. Dark clouds covered the sky, and lightning began to streak across the horizon. While the wind picked up outside, I was bringing dinner to Massimo when the first power outage happened, plunging the entire mansion into complete darkness. I stopped in the middle of the hallway, waiting for my eyes to adjust while listening to the sound of rain beginning to fall heavily. Then the emergency lights came on, providing dim but sufficient lighting to navigate to Massimo's room. When I entered, I found him standing near the window watching the storm outside. The intermittent light from the lightning illuminated his profile periodically, creating dramatic shadows that only intensified the already charged atmosphere. "I brought your dinner," I announced, placing the tray on the table. "The emergency lights should last all night in case the power doesn't come." "Back." "Stay with me," Massimo said without turning, his voice competing with the sound of rain against the windows. "I don't want to eat alone during the storm." It wasn't really about the storm, and we both knew it. It was about the need to be close to each other, about the tension that grew with each passing hour without resolution. But I sat down anyway, unable to refuse when my own desire to be near him was so strong. Ramiro brought candles a few minutes later, distributing them around the room to provide more light, when he left and closed the door, leaving Massimo and me alone in the flickering candlelight. The intimacy of the moment was almost suffocating. The storm outside only intensified the feeling of being isolated from the rest of the world, trapped in our own bubble of growing tension. We ate in silence for a few minutes, but the weight of everything we weren't saying hung heavily in the air. Finally, Massimo put his fork aside and looked at me directly, the candlelight dancing in his dark eyes. "I've done terrible things, Tessa," he said suddenly, his voice low but clear. "Things that would make you hate me if you knew the details." My heart tightened with the confession, but I didn't look away. "I know." He tilted his head, surprised by my simple response. "You know? How can you know?" "Because I see it in your scars. I hear it in the conversations you have with Ramiro when you think I'm not paying attention. I understand from the type of security surrounding this house and the way people say your name. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. You live in a violent world, Massimo, that's obvious. But I also know you're more than just that. Doesn't that scare you? He asked. And there was real vulnerability in the question, as if my answer truly mattered to him. You scare me, I admitted honestly, feeling my heart beat faster. But not because of the things you've done. You scare me because of how much I care, how much I want to be near you even knowing it's dangerous, how much you've managed to get in here. I placed my hand over my heart. In just a few weeks, Massimo stood from the chair, leaning on the cane and walking to where I was sitting. When he got close, he extended his free hand to me, and without hesitating, I placed my hand in his. He pulled me up, bringing me close to his body while the storm continued roaring outside. I should push you away, he said low, his free hand rising to touch my face. For your own safety, to protect you from me and my world, but I'm too selfish to do that. Then don't, I responded, my hands rising to hold his face. I don't want to be pushed away. I choose to be here. The candlelight created dancing shadows on our faces as we stood there, trapped in that moment of inevitable intimacy. The storm outside mirrored the turbulence inside us, and when Massimo finally kissed me again, it was with an intensity that stole all the air from my lungs. It wasn't just physical desire. It was deep and terrifying connection, promise of something that went far beyond the 3 months of my contract. And while the storm continued outside and the candles burned low around us, I knew I had crossed a point of no return. I was completely in love with Massimo Pasquale, and there was nothing I could do to change it. Chapter 7. First Night Together.
Stay behind me.
2 months had passed since my arrival at the Pasquale mansion, and the transformations were impossible to ignore. Massimo could walk short distances without support now, using the cane only for extra security. Strength had returned almost completely to his legs, and Dr. Benedetti was impressed with the recovery that defied all initial prognoses. But the deepest transformation wasn't physical. It was the way Massimo smiled now, how the hardness in his eyes had softened when he looked at me, and I was completely in love with him. There was no more denying or pretending it was just forced proximity. It was deep and real and absolutely terrifying because my contract would end in 1 month. It was on a Friday night that everything finally solidified irrevocably. Massimo had planned a special dinner to celebrate his recovery. Just the two of us in the private dining room. When I came downstairs after getting ready, I found the room transformed into something magical. Candles were distributed everywhere, creating soft and romantic lighting. The table was elegantly set, crystal glasses and silver cutlery gleaming in the light of the flames. And Massimo was there, standing without support, wearing dark pants and a white shirt, waiting for me. My heart skipped a beat when I saw him there, strong and confident, so different from the broken man I'd met 2 months ago. A soft smile touched his lips when he saw me standing at the entrance. "You look beautiful," he said, extending his hand toward me. "You're standing," I responded with an emotional voice, placing my hand in his. "Without the cane." He intertwined our fingers and pulled me closer, his eyes shining with pride. "I never thought I'd walk again. The doctor said it was impossible." I squeezed his hand, feeling emotion tighten my throat. I never doubted it. Not for a second. Dinner was served and we ate, talking about everything and nothing, laughing at stories and sharing memories. Massimo poured wine into our glasses, and when we toasted, his eyes held mine with an intensity that made my stomach flip. "What are we toasting to?" I asked. "To you." He responded without hesitation. "For making me believe that impossible was just a word. For entering my life and changing absolutely everything." His words were so honest they made my eyes burn. We drank, and when we finished eating, soft music began to play. Massimo stood and extended his hand to me again. "Dance with me." It wasn't a question. It was a vulnerable request disguised as a command. I placed my hand in his and let him guide me. His arms wrapped around me, one hand on my waist and the other holding mine, as we began to move slowly to the rhythm of the music. Massimo was still weak, his legs trembling slightly with the effort. But he was trying, determined to have that perfect moment with me. I leaned more against him, offering support, and felt when he relaxed. "Your legs are shaking," I whispered worriedly. We should stop. No. He responded firmly, pulling me closer. It's worth it. Holding you like this is worth any effort. My heart swelled, and I let my head rest against his shoulder. His fingers traced soft patterns on my back, sending shivers across my entire skin. When the music changed, Massimo stopped dancing but didn't release me. His hands rose to hold my face, forcing me to look at him. Tessa. My name came out as both plea and promise. I need you. My heart was beating so hard I could barely breathe. Massimo, not just as a nurse. He continued, his thumb tracing my lower lip. As a woman, as my woman, as the person who made me come back to life. And then he kissed me, deeper and more intense than any previous kiss. His hands buried themselves in my hair as he pulled me closer, as if he couldn't get enough, and I responded with equal hunger, my hands gripping his shoulders. When we separated, both breathing heavily, there was fierce determination in his eyes. Massimo picked me up in his arms, one arm under my knees and the other supporting my back. It was difficult for him. I could see the effort, but he was determined. Massimo, you're going to hurt yourself. I protested weakly. I won't, he responded, beginning to walk toward his room. Not when I can finally have you the way I've wanted for weeks. Each step was measured, but he didn't falter. When we reached the room and he placed me on the bed, the light from candles already lit there created an intimate atmosphere. Massimo stood before me for a moment, just watching me with eyes that burned with desire. Are you sure? He asked, and there was real vulnerability in the question. Because if we cross this line, there's no going back. You'll be mine. Completely. My heart was beating so hard. I should hesitate, think about the consequences. But when I looked at him there, strong and vulnerable at the same time, there was only one thing I wanted. I'm sure, I responded, extending my hand. I'm yours. And then he was over me, his lips finding mine with hunger suppressed for weeks. His hands explored my body with reverence and urgency, as if trying to memorize every curve. And I responded with equal intensity. When we finally came together, it was with a tenderness that surprised me. Massimo was gentle in ways that contrasted with the hardness he showed the world, touching me as if I were precious. He murmured words in Italian against my skin. Some I understood and others I could only guess the meaning of. You saved me, he whispered against my lips. Brought me back to life when I was lost. I held his face between my hands. You saved yourself. I was just here. He shook his head, his eyes shining with emotion. No, it was you. It was always you. The night unfolded in moments of passion interspersed with tenderness. Massimo worshipped every inch of me, saying I was perfect, that I was his, that he would never let me go. And I surrendered completely, allowing myself to be vulnerable in ways I had never been before. It was my first time with someone so dangerous, but he was gentle in ways that belied the violence I knew existed in him. It was as if with me he could be different, could be the man he chose to be. When we finally rested, intertwined with messy sheets around us, Massimo held me against his chest and stroked my hair. I could hear his heart beating strong beneath my ear. You're mine now, he said low, his fingers tracing patterns on my back. Completely, in all the ways that matter. There was possessiveness in those words, but instead of scaring me, it made me feel cherished. But reality began to seep in. I raised my head to look at him. What happens when I leave? My voice came out small. In 1 month, my contract ends. I have to go back to school. Massimo immediately tensed. He turned me so we were face to face, his face centimeters from mine as he spoke with fierce intensity. You're not going. It wasn't a negotiation. It was an absolute declaration. Never. You're mine now, and I don't let go of what's mine. The possessive way he held me made my heart melt. Massimo, I have responsibilities. Graduate school? You'll finish here. He interrupted me. You'll continue your studies, graduate, do everything you planned. But here, with me, as mine. He kissed me again, deep and possessive, eliminating any argument. And as I lost myself in the sensation of him, I knew I had already made my decision. I was going to stay, because I loved him. Completely, irrevocably. When the first light of morning began to filter through the curtains, we were lying intertwined. Massimo was looking at the ceiling, a thoughtful expression on his face. What is it? I asked. My world is dangerous, Tessa. Being with me means being at constant risk, he said, his arms tightening around me. The men who attacked me are still out there, and now that you're important to me, you become a target. Then you protect me, I responded simply, and I learned to live in this world. Together. He looked at me with admiration mixed with fear. You're extraordinary, because I love you. The words came out honest and raw. The effect on him was immediate. His eyes shone with emotion so strong it was almost palpable. Say it again, he ordered, his voice hoarse. I love you, I repeated without hesitation. I love you, Massimo Pasquale. Completely. He kissed me with renewed hunger, and when he pulled away, his words made my heart overflow. I love you too, more than I thought possible. You're my life now, Tessa, my everything. And as the morning progressed, we stayed there intertwined, making promises we were determined to keep, because the love we shared was too strong to be denied, even knowing the path would be dangerous. In that moment, in each other's arms, we belonged to each other, completely, forever. Chapter 8: Possessiveness and Danger.
We're mine forever.
The week following that first night, together passed too quickly, each day bringing me closer to the end of my contract and the decision we needed to make. Massimo was completely recovered now, walking without the cane and resuming his normal activities. I saw him less during the day, since he had returned to attending business meetings and dealing with famiglia, matters that before had been left only in Ramiro's hands. But every night he came to my room, or took me to his, and we spent hours talking and losing ourselves in each other. It was Thursday, only 2 weeks until the end of the contract, when Massimo finally brought up the subject we had both been avoiding. We were in his office. I had come up just to drop off some final medical documents that Dr. Benedetti had requested when he closed the door behind me and looked at me with a serious expression. Extend the agreement. It wasn't a request. It was a direct order, said with the authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. My heart tightened in my chest. Massimo, you know it's not that simple. I have school, I have my life. Your life is here. He interrupted me, his voice becoming harder. With me. Not out there in some tiny apartment struggling to pay bills. Here where you belong. The way he said it, as if my previous life had no value at all, ignited something defensive inside me. My life is what I built, Massimo. My dreams, my plans, everything I fought to achieve. I can't just throw that away. He took long steps toward me, his eyes darkening with frustration and something more dangerous. I'm not asking you to throw anything away. I'm offering everything you need to continue your dreams here. You can study, you can graduate, you can do everything you planned. Just don't leave. You don't understand. I tried to explain, feeling the first real crack in the perfect relationship we had built. I need to do this on my own. Need to prove to myself that I can without depending on anyone. His expression hardened completely. I'm not anyone. I'm the man you love. The man who loves you. And I'm offering you a better life than you'd ever have alone. The words hurt. More than they should because there was truth in them. But there was also arrogance that irritated me deeply. A better life according to your standards. But what about according to mine? Your standards? He practically spat the words. Struggling to survive is better than having everything you need? Working yourself to exhaustion is better than having comfort and security? It's better than being someone's property. The sentence came out louder than I intended, loaded with all the frustration growing inside me. Massimo went completely still, his eyes burning into mine with dangerous intensity. Property. He repeated the word slowly, as if testing the taste of it. You think that's what you are to me? Property? Isn't it? I challenged back. You just said my life is here, as if I had no choice, as if my opinion didn't matter. He closed the distance between us in 2 quick steps, his hands gripping my arms with force that bordered on painful but didn't cross the line. You're mine, he said in a low and intense voice. But there's a difference between being mine and being property. You're mine because you chose to be. Because you love me as much as I love you. Because what we have is too real and too deep to simply end because a contract says it should. I tried to pull away, but he didn't let go. Massimo, let me go. No. The refusal was absolute. Not until you understand. Not until you stop looking for excuses to run. I'm not running, I protested, feeling tears of frustration burn my eyes. I'm trying to maintain some sense of my own identity. Some independence. He finally released me and took a step back, running his hands through his hair with evident frustration. You want to leave? Want to leave me? Then go. The door is right there. I looked at the door and then back at him. I should go, should leave that office and start making plans to return to my normal life. But my feet didn't move, because the painful truth was that I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay, but I needed it to be my choice, not his order. I took a step toward the door, testing, and saw when something broke in his expression. Massimo moved faster than I expected, blocking my path with his body. His hands on my shoulders, but this time gentle instead of firm. Please. The word came out low and broken, so different from the always controlled man I knew. Don't go. I'll give you anything. Money, freedom, time, space. Anything you need. Just don't leave me. The raw vulnerability in his voice dissolved all my anger. I saw in his eyes the real fear of losing me, the panic of someone who had never truly needed anyone until now. And suddenly I understood. Massimo wasn't trying to control me out of arrogance. He was desperate, because I was the first thing in his life he couldn't simply buy or command. I don't want your money, I said softly, placing my hand over his heart. I never did. He held my wrist, squeezing as if I might disappear. Then what do you want? Tell me and it's yours. You, I responded honestly. The real you. Not the possessive man who gives orders, but the man who dances with me even when his legs hurt, who kisses me like I'm the air he needs to breathe, who looks at me like I'm the most precious thing in his world. Massimo pulled me into his arms, holding me so tight I could barely breathe. You are the most precious thing. You're everything. And I'm sorry for being too possessive. I just never had something I cared about losing until you. I was about to respond when a loud explosion echoed from outside the mansion. Massimo immediately pushed me to the floor, covering my body with his while the sound of breaking glass and screams came from somewhere downstairs. My heart raced with terror as I tried to understand what was happening. Stay here, Massimo ordered, already standing and heading toward the desk drawer where he kept a gun. Don't leave here for anything. Massimo, what's happening? Attack, he responded curtly, checking the gun with practical and efficient movements. Stay on the floor and don't make a sound. Before I could protest, he left the office and left me alone, trembling on the floor. I could hear sounds of fighting coming from below, voices shouting in Italian, more sounds of breaking glass. Pure terror ran through my veins as I stayed there, crouched behind the desk, praying that Massimo would be okay. Minutes that felt like hours passed until the office door opened violently. I almost screamed until I realized it was Ramiro, with blood on his face but alert eyes. Ms. Fitzgerald, we need to get you out of here. Now! He pulled me up and dragged me out of the office. Down a service staircase I didn't even know existed. I could hear Ramiro talking into his communicator, giving rapid orders as he guided me through hallways I'd never seen. When we finally reached a safe room in the basement, he pushed me inside and locked the heavy door. What was that? I managed to ask between irregular breaths. Kidnapping attempt, Ramiro responded gravely. Vittorio Esposito, the rival who attacked Mr. Pasquale before. He found out about you. My blood froze. Found out what? That you're important to him. That you're his weakness. Ramiro's eyes were too serious. They came to take you, to use you against him. The weight of those words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I had become a target. I had become Massimo's vulnerability in a world where vulnerability meant death. And suddenly I completely understood the fear he had of losing me. It wasn't just possessive love. It was real terror that his dangerous world would hurt me. When Massimo finally arrived at the safe room an hour later, covered in blood I prayed wasn't his, he pulled me into his arms with desperate force. They touched what's mine. His voice was loaded with fury I had never heard. Before, they tried to take you. I clung to him, feeling fear and relief mixed together. I'm fine. Ramiro saved me. He pulled me away just enough to look at my face, checking for injuries. That's why you can't stay. My world is too dangerous. You were almost kidnapped because of me. I held his face between my hands, forcing him to look me in the eyes. Then I learned to live in it. Teach me. Let me be part of this world for real, not just as a visitor. Massimo looked at me as if I had completely lost my mind. But then he saw the determination in my eyes, and something changed in his expression. It wasn't acceptance yet, but it was a beginning. Chapter 9, War and Eternal Love.
You look beautiful.
Oh, Massimo, this is perfect. I love you.
The days following the attack were the most tense since my arrival at the mansion. Massimo practically kept me in confinement, with armed guards outside my room 24 hours a day. I barely saw him. I knew he was planning something from the way Ramiro and other men from the organization came and went from the mansion at all hours. And when I finally found him in his office 3 days after the attack, the transformation in him was frightening. He was standing before a map of New York spread across the desk, markings and notes everywhere. His eyes were cold and calculating, completely different from the gentle and vulnerable man who held me in his arms. At night, this was the mob boss everyone feared, and for the first time since I'd met him, I felt a genuine shiver of fear seeing him like this. "Massimo." I called his attention from the door. He raised his eyes, and when he saw me, something softened slightly in his expression, but the hardness was still there, pulsing beneath the surface. "You should be resting. You should be telling me what you're planning," I responded, entering the office and closing the door behind me. Massimo sighed and stepped away from the table, coming toward me with firm and confident steps. He was completely recovered now, every trace of fragility erased by the fierce determination consuming him. "I'm going to eliminate the threat. Vittorio Esposito." I said the name I had heard Ramiro mention. "He threatened you!" Massimo's voice was loaded with barely contained fury. "Tried to kidnap you, tried to use you against me. Now he dies." The absolute coldness with which he said it made me swallow hard. "Massimo, don't let revenge consume you." He held my face between his hands, forcing me to look at him directly. "It's not revenge, Tessa. It's protection. As long as he's alive, you're in danger, and I can't live knowing someone can hurt you because of me." I saw the unwavering determination in his eyes, and knew nothing I said would make him change his mind. Massimo had made his choice, and the only thing I could do was be there when he returned. If he returned. "Then finish this quickly," I finally said, my voice trembling slightly. "And come back to me in one piece." He kissed me with desperate intensity, as if saying goodbye. "I always come back to you." The next morning, Massimo left the mansion with Ramiro and a dozen armed men. I stood at the window of his room watching the black cars disappear through the gate, my heart tight with fear for what was to come. Camilla called that day, sensing something was wrong, and for the first time I told her everything. About Massimo, about the love I felt, about the danger he was facing. "You're in love with a mob boss," she said with a mixture of disbelief and concern. "Tess, this is crazy." "I know," I admitted, tears running down my face. "But I can't stop it. I can't just turn off what I feel." "Then you stand by him," Camilla responded, with the loyalty she had always had for me, "and pray he comes back." The hours dragged like days. Night fell, and there was no news. Midnight passed and nothing. I was almost going crazy with worry when I finally heard movement downstairs. I ran out of the room and down the stairs, my heart racing when I saw Ramiro entering through the front door. "Where is he?" I asked desperately. Ramiro pointed behind him, and then I saw Massimo entering, supported by 2 of his men. He had blood everywhere, torn clothes and a deep cut on his left side. But he was alive. He was breathing. He was back. "Massimo!" I ran to him, my hands trembling when I touched his face. "You're hurt. I'm alive," he responded in a hoarse voice. "And Vittorio isn't. It's over, Tessa. The threat is over." I helped the men take him to the room and immediately began treating his injuries. The cut on his side needed stitches. There were bruises everywhere, and he was obviously in pain, but I worked with steady hands, cleaning and stitching while he watched me in silence. "No more wars," I said when I finished bandaging the last injury. "Please, Massimo, no more." He took my hand and pulled it to his chest, over the heart that beat strong and steady. "For you, I'd stop the world from turning. If you ask me to leave this world, I leave. If you ask me to change, I change. Anything, as long as you stay with me." Tears ran down my face as I leaned to kiss him, softly, I'll stay. No matter what happens. I'll stay. A week later, when Massimo was completely healed from the battle injuries, he took me to the mansion garden at sunset. He was nervous in a way I had never seen in him before, his hands sweating slightly when he held mine. "I don't have a ring," he began, his words coming out fast and a little awkward. "Because this isn't about diamonds or showing off. It's about promise, about real commitment." My heart began to beat erratically when I understood where this was going. "Be my wife, Tessa," he continued, his eyes burning into mine with absolute intensity. "My partner in everything, my reason to wake up every day, my everything." "And my career?" I asked, needing to know he understood I still had my own dreams. Massimo smiled, and for the first time there was genuine lightness in that expression. "Build a clinic here, help my people. The people from the community who never have access to decent medical care. Use your skills legitimately to make a real difference. I'll finance everything." His answer was perfect in ways I didn't even know I needed. He wasn't asking me to give up my dreams. He was offering me a way to realize them in an even more meaningful way. "Yes." The word came out without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." Massimo picked me up and spun me around, laughing in a free and happy way I had never heard from him before. And when he put me back on the ground and kissed me, it was with a promise of a future we would both build together. The wedding happened 2 months later, following all the traditions of the Italian famiglia. The ceremony was in the private chapel on the property, with only the closest people present. Camilla was my maid of honor, her eyes shining with tears as she helped me put on the traditional white dress. "You're really going to do this," she said, adjusting my veil. "Marry the mob boss." "I'm going to marry the man I love," I corrected with a smile. "Who happens to be a mob boss?" Camilla laughed through tears. "You tamed a lion, Tess. Transformed the most dangerous man in New York into someone who smiles and plans. Medical clinics." When I entered the chapel and saw Massimo waiting at the altar, impeccable in an Italian black suit, my heart overflowed. The way he looked at me was as if I were a miracle and a dream come true at the same time. And when we exchanged vows in Italian and English, promising love and loyalty before God and the Familia, I knew I had made the right choice. The following months were the happiest of my life. I finished my graduate degree while planning the medical clinic that would be my legacy. Massimo kept every promise, financing everything, and ensuring I had total freedom to manage the project as I wanted. The clinic opened 6 months after our wedding, serving the low-income Italian community that never had access to decent health care. A year after the wedding, I was working at the clinic when Massimo appeared unexpectedly. He leaned against the doorframe of my office, just watching me treat an elderly patient with blood pressure problems. When I finally finished and the woman left thanking me profusely, he entered and closed the door. "Do you regret anything?" he asked, coming toward me with that confident walk that still made my heart race. "About what?" I responded, standing to meet him halfway. "Choosing this life. This world. Me." There was real vulnerability in the question, as if after everything he still doubted I was happy. I held his face between my hands, forcing him to look at me. "My only regret is that you had to get hurt so much for me to find you, that we needed so much suffering to get here." Massimo smiled and pulled me into his arms. "Maybe we were healing each other all along. You healed my body and I healed your lonely soul. We healed each other." I agreed, kissing him softly. It was in that moment I told him about the pregnancy. I saw when the news hit him, his eyes widening with shock, and then shining with pure emotion. He picked me up, spinning me carefully while laughing in that free way he only used with me now. The following months were marked by his extreme protection. Massimo practically wrapped me in cotton, insisting I reduce my hours at the clinic, that I have even more present security, that I rest more. It was suffocating sometimes, but also deeply loving. He was terrified of losing me or the baby, and expressed it through obsessive care. "Our child will be born in a different world," he said one night, with his hands on my growing belly. "Safer, better. Better world because of you," I responded, covering his hands with mine. "You changed, Massimo. Became better." He kissed my forehead with infinite tenderness. "I became better because you showed me it was possible, that I could be more than violence and power." Our son was born on a sunny, Spring morning. Lorenzo Pasquale came into the world screaming loudly, with his father's dark eyes and the small nose that was completely mine. Massimo cried when he held him for the first time, silent tears running down his face as he looked at the miracle we had created. 2 years later, the final scene of our story unfolded beautifully and perfectly. We were in the mansion garden, the same place where Massimo had proposed to me. Lorenzo ran between the flowers with happy laughter, his dark hair messy from the wind. Massimo chased him with genuine smiles, completely transformed from the broken man I'd met years ago. I watched the two of them playing, my heart so full it felt like it would overflow. The clinic was thriving, serving hundreds of patients per month. Massimo had gradually withdrawn from the more violent aspects of the business, focusing on legitimate investments. We weren't perfect. There were still challenges and complications of living in that world, but we were happy. Deeply, completely happy. Massimo picked up Lorenzo and came toward me, our son laughing in his strong arms. When they got close, Lorenzo extended his little arms to me, and I took him, feeling that immense maternal love wrap around me. "Mama!" he shouted happily, kissing my cheek with a wet child's kiss. Massimo wrapped both of us in his arms, creating a bubble of love and security. "My family," he whispered against my hair. "My entire world." And as the sun set over the Pasquale mansion, painting the sky gold and pink, I knew I had found my happy ending in the most unlikely place possible. In the arms of a dangerous man who had become my everything, and together, we had created something beautiful from chaos and pain. We had created love, family, future, and that was the greatest healing of all. Final reflection. The story of Tessa and Massimo is, at its essence, a narrative about the humanity that exists even in the most unlikely places and in the most hardened people. It's a deep exploration of how forced vulnerability can become the portal to genuine transformation, and how true love doesn't consist of changing someone, but in creating a safe space where that person chooses to transform. Massimo Pasquale began his journey as a man who had built his entire identity on absolute control and unwavering strength. In his world, vulnerability was synonymous with death, and allowing someone to see his weaknesses was an invitation to destruction. The accident that put him in the wheelchair wasn't just physical trauma, it was the complete collapse of the persona he had cultivated his entire life. For the first time, he was completely defenseless, dependent on others for basic functions, unable to use the brute force that had always been his survival tool. And then came Tessa. Not with the pity he hated, nor with the fear he expected, but with respectful dignity that recognized his humanity beyond his condition. She didn't treat him like a charity project or dangerous threat, but as a complete person deserving of professional care and human respect. This revolutionary approach disarmed Massimo in ways no violence ever could, creating fissures in the armor he kept around himself. His transformation wasn't instantaneous or easy. It was a daily struggle against deeply rooted instincts, against the fear that showing vulnerability would result in betrayal or abandonment. But Tessa remained constant, not tolerating abusive behavior, but also not running when he tested her limits. She established that kindness wasn't weakness, that caring for someone didn't mean allowing mistreatment, and that true love required mutual responsibility. For Tessa, the journey was equally transformative. She entered that mansion with clear objectives and well-defined professional boundaries, but discovered that the human heart rarely respects boundaries the mind establishes. Falling in love with Massimo forced her to confront her own beliefs about independence, control, and what it truly meant to choose her own path. She learned that accepting help didn't diminish her strength, that true love could coexist with personal ambition, and that sometimes the most unexpected paths lead exactly where we need to be. The central morale of this story lies in the idea of mutual healing. Massimo wasn't saved only by Tessa, nor was she transformed only by him. They healed each other because they chose to see beyond the masks each wore. He saw beyond the professional nurse to the passionate woman struggling to balance dreams and reality. She saw beyond the dangerous criminal to the man terrified of never being whole again. The story also explores the moral complexity of loving someone whose past is stained with violence. Tessa didn't ignore or romanticize the choices Massimo had made. She recognized the reality of his world, the genuine dangers, the moral consequences. But she also recognized that people are more than their worst choices, that context matters, and that the capacity for change exists in all of us when we find reasons strong enough for transformation. Their happy ending wasn't magical or unrealistic. It was built on hard work, mutual commitment, and the willingness of both to adapt without losing their essences. Massimo didn't completely abandon his world, but chose to operate in it in less destructive ways. Tessa didn't sacrifice her dreams, but reimagined them in ways that served both her vocation and her love. Fundamentally, this is a story about the transformative power of being truly seen. When someone looks beyond our defenses and chooses to love us in our rawest vulnerability, we open possibilities for change we never imagined alone. It's about how genuine love doesn't demand perfection, but rather honesty, growth, and the daily choice to stay even when it gets difficult. The final lesson is perhaps the most powerful. Everyone deserves the chance to heal, to transform, to become better versions of ourselves. And sometimes, that healing begins in the most unexpected place possible, in the hands of someone who chooses to see our humanity when the rest of the world sees only our flaws. And if you want to check out another video with powerful emotions, click on the video appearing now on your screen.